Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's webinar. We are going to wait a couple of minutes to let people in, and then start the webinar. Uh, for for those who have joined, please share your name and where you're connecting from. It's always nice to see how our All Atlantic community gets together. Okay, maybe we'll start, and hopefully people will keep joining us. So I'm going to share my presentation. Hello, Daniel. I hope you can see it, right? Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are, and a very welcome to today's All Atlantic Connect webinar, organized under the Oceano Supporting Action that supports the All Atlantic Ocean Research Innovation Alliance, or AWARIA. My name is Tanya Lishan. I'm work at the Earth Center, and I am part of the Oceano project. It's a pleasure to have you all with us today. Before I begin, I'd like to invite everyone who joined us to introduce yourselves in the chat. Please share your name and where you're connecting from. Also, we welcome you are welcome to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A panel, and we will address it during the discussion. Also, a quick note before we proceed, this session is being recorded and will be available online after this session. So through the All Atlantic Connect webinars, we aim to strengthen connections across the Atlantic Ocean, bringing together scientists, policymakers, youth, and communities to share experiences, ideas, and inspiration around our shared ocean goals. The AWARIA presents much more than a framework for scientific collaboration. It builds on more than a decade of science diplomacy. It all started in 2011 when the European Ocean adopted the Atlantic Strategy. And then in 2013, the Galway Statement established the collaboration between the European Commission, the European Union, Canada, and the United States. In 2015, we saw the creation of the All Atlantic Research Alliance, followed by the Blaze Statement in 2017. In 2018, we saw South Africa and Brazil joining the AWARIA. And then in 2022, with the All Atlantic Declaration, we also were joined by Argentina, Cape Verde, and Morocco. Then we had through the Atlantic Forum in Cape Town, Ottawa, and Brussels, we saw other countries joining us, and now we are 13 AWARIA countries, as you see here, around the Atlantic Ocean. So today, today. Well, the area builds. We are building an all-Atlantic community grounded in common interests, mutual learning, and co-creation. And together we are developing collaborative projects, workshops, and data sharing platforms aligned with the priorities of the last declaration, the All-Atlantic Declaration signed in 2022. At Oceano, we are proud to lead the Action Area 1, the regarding coastal resilience, focusing on understanding the relationship between the ocean and climate, and how this knowledge can help strengthen the resilience of coastal communities. And then we have the Action Area 2, the Ocean Observation and Modeling, and this is led by NOAA, which coordinates Atlantic Ocean observing and modeling capacities. So here I'm just showing a really nice visual created during the last All Atlantic Forum in Brussels held this past September, which nicely illustrates what was discussed in the session on results and future actions, working towards the two action areas, coastal resilience and ocean observation. It also highlights how Oceano is supporting our area through support and governance, engagement, and communication and organization of the different forum. And right now we are looking ahead to our next Atlantic Forum that's going to be held in Brazil in April 2026. Until then, we have several events and initiatives to help us build momentum, including these All Atlantic Connect webinars. This first series is organized in collaboration with Oceans20 Brazil and Ocean20 South Africa. And with that, I would like to play a video by Alexandre Turra, who co-lead the Oceans20 Brazil initiatives under the Brazilian presidency of G20. So let me stop sharing my presentation and share the video.
Friends of the Ocean, welcome to our webinar promoted by the Oceano Coordination Support Action in partnership with Oceans20, with reflections from Brazil's past presidency and South Africa's current leadership of G20. We are delighted to have you with us today to discuss vital issues impacting our oceans and, by extension, the future of the planet. The O20, which emerged during the last G20 cycles in Indonesia and India, plays a key role in giving civil society a voice in ocean discussions. By bringing together non-governmental organizations, private initiatives, indigenous peoples, traditional communities, and scientists, O20 strengthens the presence of the ocean on global agendas. The formal creation of Oceans20, the civil society engagement group on oceans, by the Brazilian presidency at the G20, represents a historic milestone, recognizing the central role of the oceans in the global climate, energy, and environment agendas. The oceans are interconnected, but they are also diverse in their characteristics, and this plurality needs to be considered in all discussions and recommendations for action. In Brazil, the Ocean Agenda was one of the 4 pillars of the Working Group on Climate and Environmental Sustainability, coordinated by the Brazilian Ministry of the Environment, and was intertwined with other working groups reflecting the transversal nature of this topic. O20 was coordinated by the UNESCO Chair for Ocean Sustainability at the University of São Paulo, in collaboration with the World Economic Forum, the UN Global Compact, the Brazilian Biodiversity Fund, FUNBIO, and the National Institute for Ocean Research, INPO. In 2025, South Africa is leading O20, and the United States of America will come next in sustaining and strengthening this process. Oceano supports the All Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance, AORIA, which connects researchers and institutions across the Atlantic Ocean, fostering the creation of an All Atlantic community, promoting the exchange of knowledge and experiences, essential for the conservation and sustainable management of the Atlantic Ocean. In this All Atlantic Connect webinar series, we bring together experts from different areas of knowledge to share insights and foster a deep dialogue on the importance of the ocean in our lives, emphasizing the urgent need for collective action to elaborate the Oceans 20 recommendations through global cooperation under the leadership of South Africa. Get ready, get ready for a session rich in learning and exchanging ideas. Feel free to participate with questions and comments throughout the event.
Okay, this was it. Thank you very much, Alexander Tucha. So yeah, on October 21, on October 21st, we had our opening session, which can be viewed on the All Atlantic YouTube channel. And today, our second session, we will focus on ocean economy, finance, and partnership, and how these can accelerate ocean action globally and across the Atlantic region. So right now, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Dennis Fritsch, Senior Advisor at the Oceano Azul Foundation, an ocean systems change investment lead at Catapult Ocean, a marine biologist and ocean finance expert. Dennis previously led the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Initiative at UNEP Finance Initiative, where he worked to bridge investors, insurers, and policymakers in aligning with DG 14. So Dennis, the screen is yours.
Yeah, thanks very much for the invitation to moderate today's webinar, and hi everyone, welcome to this session. Today we want to explore how innovative finance and strong partnerships can accelerate impact globally and across the Atlantic basin more specifically. And to do this, we want to draw on priorities from the All Atlantic Declaration and the Oceans 20 Communiqué, namely the role of the sustainable blue economy and initiatives on this topic, financial mechanisms, and of course cross-sector collaborations in driving what really we hope to be transformative ocean action. And I'm very honored to share this virtual floor with a great group of international experts on these topics who will speak about how to identify opportunities for mobilizing resources, about aligning investments and strengthening cooperation that supports inclusive and resilient ocean economies. And I do want to spend just a couple of minutes to put this conversation into the wider context before I shut up and introduce the speakers and let them speak to you. What I want to highlight initially in this introduction is really the forces we need to start. To start a true and systemic transformation of our relationship with nature and the ocean. These, for me, are the defining undercurrents we need to be aware of to make meaningful progress. We are all aware that the breakdown of life-giving natural systems is becoming one of the most pressing societal and therefore also economic risks humanity has ever faced. Yet we continue to operate as if these systems have no value because their benefits, such as carbon cycling, the generation of biomass, or coastal protection, are mostly invisible within our decision-making processes. And of course, this is a fundamental issue that requires not just individual and small-scale solutions, but a true and holistic transformation of the way we do things. We really need a new way of doing economics, which is the main language of the decision makers of our time. For that, we need to kind of shed our dogmas that nature can somehow be squeezed in our economy, alongside trying to counter vested interests that attempt to maintain the illusion that things can simply continue as they are currently. So what we really need is a new economic narrative that truly reshapes global markets and the valuation of our relationship with and dependency on nature if we want to make any meaningful progress on the SDGs and have a livable planet, of course. And for that, we need new frameworks, collaborations, and mindset that challenge conventional thinking and can inform forward-looking policies that aim at prosperity for all. And I think the conversation around blue finance and the sustainable blue economy is a perfect example of how we might do these things in practice. We all know that the critical driver of ocean degradation is economic activity, specifically the current harmful and extractive approach to ocean resources that comes with the pursuit of relentless growth on a planet with finite resources. And this extractive ocean economy is expected to double in size by 2050. But how do we ensure that this expected growth is sustainable? And a big part of the answer has to do with shifting financial flows away from harmful activities toward what many would call a sustainable or regenerative blue economy. However, without a foundational shift in how this economic activity is financed and governed, the growing blue economy risks worsening the same extractive pressures that have led to our current situation. Our business as usual approach really is working against us and the ocean. Just as an example, the UN Environment Program reported that for every $1 spent in the global economy today, around 97 cents go toward activities that harm nature, and only 3 cents go toward what we might call nature-based solutions. And that means that any progress we make in increasing ocean protection and restoration is undermined significantly by the fact that harmful activities are incentivized by global markets and therefore are multiplying and increasing. But of course, we all intrinsically know that markets are built on the work of the ocean, forests, animals, microbial life. So manufacturing plants, data centers, retail stores, they all depend on predictable seasons, on fresh water, on fertile soil, and a healthy ocean. And of course, classical economics assumes that price in principle should reflect value. But there are cases such as with externalities where prices fail to adequately reflect the reality of the world. Ecosystem services are treated as externalities in a traditional economic approach, and as a result, they're being degraded without accounting for the long-term value they provide. And that means that living nature remains invisible to markets, meaning that nature and the ocean are usually absent from decision making, which enables the continuation of business as usual. And here, with the upcoming sustainable and regenerative blue economy approach, I think we have an opportunity to do things differently. I just want to highlight one example of this traditional approach. Currently, a fish caught in a net and sold on a market is worth more in market terms than that same fish playing its role in the global carbon and nutrient cycles. And that is what I think needs to change. And one piece of the puzzle can be assigning a market value to living nature so that conserving and restoring it and its systemic functions can drive investment and be included in economic and political decision making. And so that requires no less than shifting the global mindset to see the ocean not as a commodity to extract from, but as equity to safeguard and invest in. And that understanding must be embedded across global finance, economics, governance, and legal frameworks to really integrate a new and holistic understanding of the value the ocean provides us with. We're unlikely to see large-scale nature restoration and improvement of the health of the ocean, including reaching the 30 by 30 goals, 30% protection of land and sea by 2030, if protected areas and sustainability initiatives continue to be considered a sunk cost. If we don't find an appropriate means for their valuation, our current economic model is poised to continually undermine any successes from conservation efforts. But if we get this right, it'll be a no-brainer from an economic point of view for governments and for financial institutions to channel capital toward a sustainable and regenerative blue economy and away from extraction. And that is what I hope helps a bit set the scene of what we're up against. And I know that the speakers we have lined up for you can speak to various parts of this equation, and I'm very much looking forward to their interventions. Before I introduce the speakers, I just want to let you in the audience know that if you have any questions throughout the session, please just put them in the Q&A section at the bottom, and we'll be able hopefully to discuss those at the end of the presentations. So we'll start our roster of speakers and our topics with the topic of finance. And here we have two experts joining us today. The first one is Klaas de Vos, who is a founder at Ocean Fox Advisory. And the second one is Luis Pazos, the administrator at the Brazilian Development Bank. And I would like to invite Klaas first to take the floor and share his thoughts with us on this topic. Over to you, Klaas.
Thank you so much, Dennis, and good morning, good afternoon to you all. As Dennis says, my name is Klaas de Vos. I'm a blue economy and blue finance consultant based in the Netherlands, which of course is an Atlantic state. So I'm delighted to be participating in this conversation. I want to spend the next few minutes talking a little bit about the relevance of finance to this ocean conversation and to the pieces that Dennis has just laid out in terms of the importance of nature within the economy. Finance, as I'm sure you all know, is an enormous topic that covers every aspect of the economy, touches multiple points across the breadth of society, and is not something that you can do justice in an 8-minute presentation. So this is going to be a very brief and very high-level canter through of why we might want to think about finance in the context of the ocean, what that means specifically for South Africa, and then end hopefully with some food for thought on how to take some of those pieces forward. So to begin with, and to reiterate a lot of what Dennis has highlighted, is that, of course, the ocean is enormously significant to society, to the global economy. It underpins society through the ecosystem services that it provides. Those are the 4 sort of broad categories of ecosystem services that we think about. Provisioning services, that's the fish that we catch, the resources that we extract from the environment, and regulating services. These are the systems that the ocean contributes to keep the planet going, to keep us all alive, to keep biodiversity intact. And then cultural services, which are the sorts of resources that we consume spiritually and psychologically, the enjoyment that we get from the ocean, the significance that it has to societies, to religions, to cultures. In addition to those profound ecosystem services that underpin society, the ocean itself is also one of the backbones of the global economy. Its asset value is approximately $24 trillion US, and if it were a country, the GDP, the economic output of all of the ocean's sectors, its industries, and its ecosystem services would be the 5th largest in the world. It would be roughly equivalent to the size of the German economy. But the ocean health, to the points that Dennis made earlier, is at risk. Up to $8.4 trillion US in value are at risk globally annually, and about 2/3 of listed equity, that means companies that are listed on stock exchanges, are exposed to that risk. And these are risks to these underlying ecosystem services that we all rely on. So there is a need there to transition to sustainability for the ocean, for a healthy ocean, but for a healthy society as a result. And because this finance that currently exists in the global system is supporting that unsustainable activity, there is an ocean finance gap that we talk about. You can argue at great length about the scale of that gap and the reasons that that gap exists, but that's not as important as recognizing that the gap is there and that it needs to be filled by changing the way that we think about our relationship with the ocean and the kinds of economic activity, the sustainable blue economy that we want to see in an ocean environment. So what does that mean? It means that there are different stakeholders and different types of capital that we need to start influencing, that we need to transform, and that we need to move to be in line with this sustainable blue economy concept to help support and accelerate that transition. And this diagram on the right here is from the Ocean Investment Protocol, which is a joint publication that was put out by UNEP-FI and the UN Global Compact last year, or earlier this year, I forget, recently, which looks at the ways in which different stakeholder groups need to work together to enable and to scale up the financing for this transition. You can see here the orange circles are all of the different stakeholder types that have a role to play specifically in the finance domain. So there are governments here, there's industry here, and different types of financial institutions, development finance, banks, investors, insurers, and the types of capital that they work with in order to finance the ocean economy, and therefore what needs to change across those different types of finance to be able to effect that transition. So this is larger than any one stakeholder group can be held responsible for. This is something that requires collective action, collective transformation to enable that transition at scale. So, like I said, that's very high level. That is masking a lot of detail here. So I want to zoom in now on what this means in the context of South Africa in particular. What does this mean for South Africa's blue economy? As you, I'm sure, already know, South Africa sits across two oceans, several biodiversity hotspots. It is a blue economy leader on the African continent. Its exclusive economic zone, the area of the ocean that South Africa has the exclusive rights to be able to exploit, is larger than its land area. So there is an enormous significance of the blue economy to South Africa. Shipping and tourism in particular are big contributors to its gross domestic product, and it is a net recipient of about $15 billion in both credit, that's essentially loans and bonds, and institutional investment over the period 2016 to 2023. And that was by far the largest amount of financing that was received by any country in the Southwest Indian Ocean region. This is based on a study here that you can see the cover page for on the right that was undertaken by Profundo and WWF International. It's a fantastic report. Really recommend taking a look at that. That assesses where these financial flows sit within the Southwest Indian Ocean, and then looking in particular in this edition at South Africa and what that means in terms of financial flows and recommendations for finance. And one of the things that that report makes clear is that a lot of that financing, a lot of that economic activity is going towards unsustainable sectors, particularly mining and oil and gas, which is not aligned with this idea of the sustainable blue economy and the transition towards a sustainable blue economy. At the same time, that presents a lot of opportunities to think about in a South African context for fisheries, for aquaculture in particular, for sustainable tourism, for renewable energy in the marine environment. And this lines up with an existing initiative within South Africa's National Development Plan, Operation Phakisa, which means hurry up, which aims to grow the South African blue economy to represent 4.5% of its total GDP by 2035. So there is a lot of momentum in the South African context to grow the blue economy, to make sure that it contributes to wealth, to livelihoods, to security within a South African context. But this, of course, has key challenges if that isn't done sustainably. There are concerns over equity and inclusion, who gets access to that wealth, how is that wealth and growth distributed across South Africa, where do the capacity needs intersect with existing bottlenecks, either in terms of infrastructure or in terms of energy availability. But similarly, and again, coming back to one of the points that Dennis raised earlier, how does this respond to nature-related risk, and where it is important to consider what dimensions of risk are relevant to financial institutions, to the economy, when we talk about declining ocean health, when we talk about overexploitation, when we talk about unsustainable growth. And actually today, a report was released by WWF that looks specifically at these sorts of high-level risks that are associated with ocean health decline and what they mean in particular for the regulators of the financial system. So these are central banks, these are financial supervisors, these are the ones that set the rules for how banks and investors operate. And this is, I think, a particularly important diagram to discuss in this context, because it doesn't just apply to these supervisors and these regulatory agencies, but this is relevant for everyone to be aware of, the relationship between ocean health decline and undermining the stability that we rely on in our own society. So this demonstrates where these transmission channels sit, between ocean health decline and macroeconomic risk, financial risk, how that affects your price stability, the stability of your currency, how that affects your inflation rate, what that means in terms of the societal response to nature loss. These are intrinsically linked and need to be considered in the context of economic development as much as they need to be considered in the context of financing. So that report is out today. Please do take a look at it if you get the chance. And what does this mean for finance in the context of South Africa? What does that mean for South African financial institutions? What does that mean for South African financial supervision? We know that South Africa, as of I think 2022, has a sustainable finance taxonomy that looks at green investment, green finance in a South African context. It is weak on the blue economy. It is weak on what is included in the context of the ocean. There is reference there to marine renewables, but there is a need for a greater sustainable finance taxonomy that includes the blue economy, that includes the ocean as part of that sustainable narrative, ideally at a regional level, but certainly at a national level. Similarly, individual financial institutions can work to build out blue investment frameworks, leveraging resources that already exist to help inform them what those can look like. So ICMA, the International Capital Market Association, worked with a number of institutions, including, again, UNEP-FI and the UN Global Compact, to build blue bond guidance to help articulate what a blue bond is and how that works and how that is intended to help scale up finance for the sustainable blue economy, for a healthy ocean. And there's a lot that financial institutions can do with respect to building pipeline, to building out investable opportunities for themselves by de-risking approaches that they can take and looking to incentivize sustainable enterprise through things like sustainability-linked loans, where they can provide discounts or better interest rates to companies that are integrating sustainability performance into their business plans, for example. And similarly, managing risk is fundamental to being able to recognize that these drivers of ocean health decline require response. And so integrating sustainability-related risk, nature-related risk into how financial institutions manage their own risk exposure is essential in the next few years. And that's going to continue to be a really hot topic in the way that it has been for the past few years. I won't go through the remainder here in a lot of detail because I know that I'm running a little bit short on time, but all that to say, please do also consider how you can engage either as a financial institution with the wider community or as a member of that wider community with financial institutions. Financial institutions desperately need sustainability expertise to be able to enable that transition to a sustainable blue economy. And there are forums, UNEP-FI, Blue Bond Accelerator, the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance for financial institutions and ocean experts and ocean stakeholders to be able to do so. And there's a lot of resources that exist to help with that. So the Ocean Investment Protocol and this central bank paper I've already mentioned, these are fantastic resources to take a look at that offer really clear recommendations towards different stakeholders, towards banks, towards governments, about how they can work together to scale up finance for the sustainable ocean. And similarly, we have some more foundational pieces in things like the Ocean Finance Handbook and UNEP-FI's publication, Turning the Tide, that full disclosure, Dennis and I worked on together to create several years ago, that outline what this means also on a sectoral level. So what does sustainability look like in the context of seafood? What does that mean for financing seafood? What does this mean for scaling up financing for renewables? What do you need to look out for in your risk management for those sectors in particular? There are resources here that exist to help scale up action and to help incentivize a more collective approach. So with that, let me stop and hand over to the rest of the panel for this session. If you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them. And thank you very much for your time. Back to you, Dennis.
Thanks so much, Klaas, for this. I do hope in the audience we have a lot of financial institutions who are not entirely sure how to take the first steps, because that was the perfect manual of what can be done now by financial institutions on this topic. And I think it's the perfect introduction to Louis' presentation now. It comes from the Brazilian Development Bank, and I know that you've been trying to integrate some of those approaches within the bank, and it would be great to hear more about your experience in developing instruments or integrating a strategy as well. So over to you, Luis.
Okay, thanks, Dennis, for the introduction, and thank class for the presentation. For me, it's so good. And then, good morning or good afternoon for our virtual audience. It's a great honor to join to this All Atlantic Connect session representing the Brazilian Development Bank. Today, I would like to share how Brazil is building an integrated approach to ocean finance, connecting environmental conservation, territorial planning, and innovation ecosystems. An approach that aims not only protect the ocean, but to finance its sustainability and empower coastal communities. This is so important for us here in Brazil. This is so important. The BNDES Azul, our Blue Economy program, was created to bridge finance and the ocean agenda in a systemic way. It combines public, private, and philanthropic capital to support marine spatial planning. And it's so important. Marine spatial planning is the first action that we do. Okay. And biodiversity restoration is important for us too, and sustainable livelihoods. It's important to highlight that the most of the topics were discussed within the framework of the O20 here in Brazil. And I take this opportunity to congratulate the UNESCO chair for its organization and innovation. Okay. Let me, here. Since 2023, the program has mobilized more than 250 million reais in finance operation. It covers four main dimensions: marine spatial planning, mapping, and organizing Brazil 8,500 kilometers coastline. Coral and mangrove restoration, protecting blue carbon ecosystem, blue biodiversity projects, including BNDES Biodiversity, Island of the Future, and Protect Next. This is a new finance line. And blue climate entrepreneurs is a new line too, that empowering inclusive innovation for coastal resilience. This initiative reflects the spirit of the Ocean Decade and O20 dialogues, combine science, policy, and finance for sustainability. And now let's see the number of these initiatives. Okay, here you have the mangrove restoration, and we finance 8 initiatives. Do you see my point? And here, in all of the coast of Brazil, these green points, and we recover all of our coast and 1,008 kilometers of mangroves. And now our marine spatial planning that we cover all of our coast, and in the south and the southeast and the northeast is ongoing, and the north is under analysis here in BNDES, okay? And BNDES Corais, the restoration of coral reefs, we have 12 projects that is under analysis. And we have other points that I need to share with you, okay? Because the BNDES Azul is not just a funding line, it's a financial architecture. Our goal is to move from isolated grants to structured financing mechanisms to attract private investors and global partners. Okay, this is important for us. We are studying and now studying three complementary instruments: blue bonds, okay, tied to measurable ocean outcomes, blue carbon and biodiversity credits, recognizing ecosystem service, and the Blue Innovation Facility, connecting startups and early-stage projects. This approach de-risks innovation and crowds in private capital, a major step for the Global South. Another complementary line is BNDES Cidade. It's a line for cities. BNDES Cidades connects urban infrastructure with ocean health, sanitation systems, coastal parks, and all of nature-based solutions, like mangrove buffers. It integrates land and sea, ensuring that Blue Finance aligns with social and urban policies. Okay. And here we have these three sections, and we have Fundo do Clima here in Brazil is an attractive line. Okay. And we know that transformation also depends on people, entrepreneurs, research, and innovators. That where BNDES Garagem, our innovation accelerator, plays a strategic role. We know that transformation also depends on people, and then it supports blue and green startups, biotechnology, clean energy, circular economy, and now is complemented by the Blue Climate Entrepreneurs initiative supporting inclusive business models and local innovation for coastal resilience and low carbon transitions. None of this would be possible without partnerships. The BNDES model relies on collaboration with a lot of institutions, okay? These partnerships create what we call ecosystems of trust. Programs such as BNDES Biodiversity and the Blue Climate Entrepreneurs initiatives are examples of how partnerships drive both conservation and innovation. For the Global South, accelerating ocean finance means addressing asymmetries of access, capacity, and representation. Developing countries must be co-designers, not just beneficiaries. And then the next steps is scaling up to transform pilots into long-term policies. BNDES Azul is structuring an integrated Blue Finance platform to track and monitor impact. We are also building co-investments mechanisms with regional banks, a new paradigm for South-South cooperation. Finance is not just about money, it's about knowledge, justice, and resilience. In conclusion, accelerating ocean finance is not only about capital, it's about redefining value. It's a true blue resurgence, recognizing the ocean as a living infrastructure that sustains economies, cultures, and futures. through BNDES Azul, BNDES Cidades, BNDES Garagem, BNDES Biodiversity, and the Blue Climate Entrepreneurs Program, Brazil is proving that finance, innovation, and inclusion came for a single wave, one that promotes not just a blue economy, but a blue society. Okay, and thank you very much. And wow,
Perfect. Thanks so much for the,
Alex, what,
thanks so much for your intervention, and I love that to hear a bit more about the kind of on the ground approaches that you're taking within the bank, and also nice to see you are taking this um, systematic, holistic approach, not just looking at financial flows, but also communities and the other parts of the system. And now, before we move on to the next section, which will be on economies, so we're kind of following the flow of money from the higher level finance toward the real economy. I just wanted to quickly remind the audience that if you have any questions throughout these presentations, then please do put them in the Q&A so we can discuss them later. But now I would like to move on to our next two speakers. And maybe I'll hand the floor first to Taon Santos, who is assistant professor at the Brazilian Naval War College. And so I'm very curious to hear more about your work, and yeah, please do take the floor.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Well, first of all, let me start by sincerely thanking the organizers for this kind invitation and for such a timely initiative. It is truly exciting to be part of this dialogue, and this dialogue actually brings together like voices from different perspectives, from the finance, from the ocean governance, and from global partnerships. So I do believe that it's really relevant and nice for us to have this conversation. And these conversations are exactly what we need to bridge technical know-how, political will, and also like community priorities into practical action. So I'm really glad to be here and to share some thoughts with you today. Well, my presentation will basically address three main points. And the first one is addressing the challenging of connecting the diverse agendas and often conflicting sectors within the ocean economy framework. So when we actually talk about the ocean economy, really, we are actually navigating through a complex space where different agendas and priorities often collide. So building a sustainable ocean economy means asking not just what we grow, but how we grow it, and more importantly, I would say for whom. So we are aiming at an economy that's actually inclusive, equitable, and sustainable at the end of the day. So it is important to take this into account because it's way more ambitious than just looking for economic growth. And the truth is, like past economic models have often overlooked social and also environmental harms. So the sustainable ocean economy actually offers us a chance to do something different. And this shift does not actually happen automatically. So it requires intentional collaboration, thoughtful policy designs, and also governance that is adaptive. And at the end of the day, we have to listen all voices connected to this agenda, all stakeholders engaged in the blue ocean agenda. So tools like marine spatial planning, as just mentioned by Luis Pazos from the Brazilian National Bank, for example, are critical here. So since MSP allow us to organize uses of ocean space in a way that's both scientific but also just, coordinating actors across sectors in activities that sometimes harm each other, and we have to manage it all, seems key. So when talking about sustainable ocean economy, we do have to take into account ocean governance. Like they walk together. And ultimately, I would say that this challenge is about building trust and a shared purpose among very different actors who all have a stake in ocean's future at the end of the day. The second point I'd like to mention here is the need for promoting participatory and inclusive ocean governance that values local specificities while strengthening regional cooperation. So first, now, one of the biggest challenges in ocean governance is that the ocean itself does not recognize borders. We have to take this all into account. And what happens in one coastal community, for example, or a country, inevitably ripples across others. So governance must move beyond national limits and operate at regional and global levels, but also must be grounded in local realities. So we have to manage this balance. And in other words, I would say that governance has to be both bottom up and top down. It's essential to engage local and communities, their traditions and knowledge, uh, alongside, of course, science and policy frameworks. So the inclusive and participatory governance isn't just an ideal here. We do have to make it happen in order for that to be legitimate and to provide lasting solutions. So at the same time, regional cooperation frameworks like this one, like our Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance, provide a space for countries to work together across the seas. And this regional dimension is exactly what the UN Ocean Decade envisions, and this global effort building like in collaboration and mutual learning across regional scale. So that's all about the UN Ocean Decade. So by linking local voices to regional efforts and global goals, we strengthen our collective ability to protect and share ocean resources sustainably. Sorry. And my last point is positioning the G20 as a catalyst for aligning investments and partnerships towards long-term ocean sustainability. Like right here, I could talk about several regional arrangements or international organizations, but the G20 stands out as specifically addressing and interesting because of its recent steps, precisely from the last year onwards, towards advancing the sustainable ocean economy agenda, which is also known as the blue economy, like worldwide. So this focus position the G20 as a key player in driving forward global initiatives around ocean sustainability. So finally, let's focus on the role of G20. And in fact, it has a unique opportunity to drive this agenda forward a global scale. And the Oceans 20, also known as O20, initiative exemplifies how the ocean is emerging as a key topic in the global economic forums. Alexander Turra's previous presentation stressed this role, and Brazil, the country I'm from, I'm Brazilian, during its G20 presidency, actively pushed ocean sustainability into a spotlight, hosting events, including here in Rio de Janeiro, where I live, that connected ocean issues with climate, biodiversity, and development challenges. So the aim is to firmly embed ocean sustainability in the G20 shared priorities and not leave it like to the sidelines. So therefore, like aligning investments with ocean health in both an economic necessity and global responsibility is key. And the G20 can bring together like government bodies and investors, civil society to like at the end of the day scale up financing mechanisms like blue bonds and impact investing, as previously mentioned by Luis Pazos and also Claude Devaux. And these partnerships can create initiatives for innovation and ensure that development benefits are equitably shared with coastal communities And by doing so, the G20 has the power to reshape, I would say, how we think about the blue economy, not just as a source of growth itself, but as a foundation for sustainable, inclusive prosperity. So, like, wrapping up, I would say that I have like 5 key takeaways that I'd like to leave you with. First, the ocean economy is a complex mix of different interests and sectors. So building it right means focusing on inclusivity, sustainability, and fairness. At the end of the day, it's not just about growth. Second point, this doesn't happen on its own. It takes deliberate collaboration and good governance tools like MSP to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and balanced. The third point is that the ocean crosses borders, so governance has to be local and regional at the same time, bringing together communities and countries to work collectively. My fourth point is frameworks like the UN Ocean Decade and alliances in the Atlantic, for example, are great examples of how regional cooperation can drive global progress. And finally, the G20 is stepping up as a key player by aligning investments and partnerships to support a long-term sustainable blue economy that benefits everyone. So these points should guide us somehow as we push forward with ocean sustainability at the global stage. So once again, thank you all for giving me the opportunity to contribute and share in this important conversation. I look forward to our continued dialogues and collaboration towards a shared sustainable ocean future. Back to you, Dennis. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And I appreciate that you summarize your own points so I don't have to do it. That is a really best practice from any speaker, I have to say, from now on. No, but great of you to highlight, especially the need for intentional and inclusive collaboration. I think that also speaks very much to the topic of today's session in general. All right, thanks so much. Let's move on. Senya Namo is here as well to speak to you, and she's a associate professor of economics and financial sciences and academic research at the University of South Africa. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation to this very important webinar that focuses on the ocean economy, finance, and partnerships. I'm sharing my slides and I'm quickly putting them in PowerPoint mode. Please confirm if you can see the slides.
Yes,
Thank
I can
you
see
very
them.
much, Dennis. Okay, so I won't spend much time introducing myself, except from saying that, as you can see, I'm coming from an institution of higher learning where our mandate really is to ensure that our curriculum is relevant. And so as I begin, I want to mention the importance of making sure that the curriculum also reflects the importance of this ocean economy. But that's not the main focus of my presentation. I'm really looking at the ocean economy and how it is important, the various sectors represented there, and the need to exploit the ocean resources, if I can use that word, in a sustainable manner. So we realize that the ocean is very important for us as we see that there's more than 1 billion people along the coast. And if we were to consider 100 kilometers of coastline, then the estimates are that we would have approximately 3 billion. That's a huge number. So again, in terms of the GDP, I know several speakers have reflected on that. It is actually 2.5% of global GDP. And most importantly, it is a vehicle for over 80% of global trade. The value has been estimated to, from 2.5 trillion, depending on the sources. Others mention 3 trillion, and there are projections to go beyond 5 trillion looking at the marine coastal resources as well as industry. We are often interested in hearing the employment numbers as well, because that's a key indicator of any sector. So the approximations as at 2021 by Adamo and others is that approximately 1.5% of the global workforce is represented in this ocean economy. And so now when I like this picture that I got from Almeida and others, where they have looked at this ocean economy in 3 phases, so to speak. So the first phase, which is in red, let me try to activate my laser pointer. Okay, so I'm talking about this first phase, which we can call the business as usual. Here, we are looking at all possible economic activities that we can engage in within this ocean economy. And I'm just trying to move things here. Okay, sorry. Just want to move something here. Okay. So we're looking at activities such as offshore oil and gas, marine equipment and construction, container shipping, shipbuilding and repair, cruise tourism, port activities, marine, the list is endless. And so the focus there, the business as usual, has been the profit maximization objective, which every business, every economist would focus on. We want to maximize profit. But then we forget what our activities actually do to the ocean economy. We think it's a resource that we can tap and continue to benefit and grow our economies, and forget about the negative consequences of the economy. Now, with the climate change and the UNFCCC, people began to realize the impact of climate change, that climate change has an impact on the environment. Unfortunately, the focus was mainly on the green elements, and the blue ocean seemed to be neglected in most of the discussions. And so as I speak today, I'm excited that we have realized that there's an importance of focusing on a decarbonized ocean economy. So this takes us now to this blue circle in the middle there, where we say, because of climate change, we now have coastal erosion. We talk of SLR, the sea level rise, issues of pollution, impacts of shipping, overfishing, overexploitation of resources. So we then got into a phase where the narrative focused on decarbonized ocean economy. Then the next phase, which is where we are now, although some of the elements from the ocean, this initial stage still persist, but the narrative now is more on sustainable ocean economy. And so within the O20 in 2024, last year in Brazil, there were 10 priority themes with a focus on driving economic prosperity, climate action, and security through ocean stewardship. And this webinar today focuses mainly, so when we talk of the blue economy, we talk of finance, we talk of sustainable partnerships, we are really mainly on theme number 1. I've tried to summarize what theme number 1 is all about. And as you can see in blue, we need to move beyond. We have excellent written policies and very little action. And so, if you see the words that I've highlighted, they speak to action. They speak to action, commit, integrate, support, promote, enhance, facilitate. And so, theme number 1 says we need to commit to these 6 pointers here as we promote a sustainable and equitable ocean economy. I'm very time conscious, so I'm going to, the notes will be provided so you can then follow through closely. So now I want to highlight some of the actions, because we are saying from Brazil, Ocean20 to South Africa, as South Africa has assumed presidency. What are the key success, if I can say, milestones that we can observe based on what the communique had said we need to focus on? And so on the aspect of committing to 100% sustainable ocean management by 2030, I think the issue of marine spatial planning frameworks came up even from the financing perspective, and we see that Brazil is doing very well on that. I want to point to the global coalition, Ocean Action 2030, which is helping countries to develop and implement sustainable ocean plans by 2030. And it is interesting to see that just last week, on the 30th of October, this handbook was released, a handbook on sustainable ocean plans, a practitioner's guide. So realizing the importance and the commitment to this 100% sustainable ocean management, then we see that the resources are available for implementation at a national level. Okay, so again, this aligns, the need for sustainable ocean management aligns with major global actions that we may all be aware of, the High Seas Treaty, and also the 30 by 30, which other speakers have already spoken about, biodiversity targets. And so we see how these initiatives or focus given at G20 level will also help us to address other global frameworks. Then in terms of integrating economic value of marine ecosystems into planning, this is very close to my heart, because as an economist, development economist, environmental economist, I have seen the challenge of data, measurability. So if you cannot measure something, how are you going to track it? I think all the speakers at some point reflected, even Dennis in your opening remarks, you reflected on the issue of placing value, correct value, to a fish that is in a net and a fish that helps us, that gives us the environmental benefits, a live fish in the ocean. And so we face a lot of challenges when it comes to trying to get robust economic analysis of costs and benefits, employing economic valuation techniques to assign monetary values to those services. And so coming from an academic institution, I think this is an area where when we do our collaboration and partnerships, we really need to focus on skills development in terms of data. I think I saw a comment popping up from the chat where I think it's Peter who mentioned that they have some data interventions, and I think it's a critical area to focus on. I do have examples of countries on the African continent that have made strides in terms of developing their marine spatial plans. And I think a closer look at those case studies will help us to learn something in terms of how other countries can operationalize that. Another aspect which Brazil Ocean20 called for was the support of a just energy transition across ocean sectors. I've also combined it with the other bullet that focused on promoting offshore renewable energy development. The main issue there was to say we need to adapt our national policies and international frameworks so that we achieve a global target of 380 gigawatts offshore wind capacity by 2030 and 2,000 by 2050. And then this would contribute to the global energy transition. So whilst monitoring the global debates closely, I'm sure we were all looking closely at the International Maritime Organization, IMO's 2050 zero emissions targets. But in the past few days or weeks, I don't have the correct date there, we see reports that the majority of the IMO member states voted in favor of postponing discussions on the net zero framework. So the concerns of us zero emissions in the ocean framework, it means they are shelved a bit for the next year. And meaning that our objectives of offshore renewable energy development may actually not be realized. But when we look at the Global Wind Energy Council's report, 2025 report, it's got an interesting forecast there that offshore wind capacity will almost triple in just 6 years. And again, that leaves us, you know, a bit closer to the 380 gigawatt target. Yes, we are on 238. It's a big difference, but just the fact that it will treble in 6 years, it's a warming realization. Then we also see that in 2019, the World Bank assessed the offshore wind potential for 115 countries. And out of those 115 countries, only 27 have set targets. So I'm talking about targets within the nationally determined contributions. Only 27 have set targets for national offshore wind. I don't know what the challenges are there. And as a researcher, I'm already pointing to you a possible area to check. What are the limitations in terms of developing this offshore wind energy? And now I've come to a point to then say, we have seen that there have been a bit of results in terms of what Brazil Ocean20 had envisaged regarding our ocean economy, finance, and partnerships. So now, with South Africa taking over the presidency, there is a communique, if you go to the site for G20, Ocean20 South Africa, there is a communique focusing on advancing a sustainable and inclusive ocean economy. So the sustainability aspect remains key, and also inclusivity. I'm a social scientist, and I always want to emphasize the livelihoods of communities in coastal areas that can not be underestimated. And so I've just highlighted the main points here. There is about 8 recommendations. When you look at them closely, they are similar to what Brazil Ocean20 also recommended. So it means we are building on the legacy of Brazil's Ocean20. Continuation is important. So we're not starting afresh. We recognize the milestones achieved and then focus on the new recommendations. So you see the SDG 14, BBNJ, and the Montreal 30 by 30 framework, sustainable blue food production. This is very important. So there is need to look at how we can produce food from the ocean in a sustainable manner. And in that way, we are then addressing the food security challenge that we are faced with. Then the scaling of ocean-based renewable energy remains an important factor. The reduction of shipping emissions, participation of women and youth, that's the inclusivity. The issue of de-risking finance, the presentations on finance, I saw a number of risks that were highlighted by our speakers, and it remains a major, major challenge. How do we attract private investment into a sector where the profit is not so clear and there are so many risks that we fail to mitigate? Then I think one important aspect, I was listening carefully when the presentations on finance were going on, and I didn't hear the issue of public-private philanthropic partnerships. I think this is one area where we have a lot of billionaires globally, and some of that money could be channeled to financing the blue economy. With the right mechanisms in place, I think this is an area that South Africa Ocean20 has identified to be a potential in terms of financing the blue economy. Then, of
Apologies,
course,
Dania, if I may humbly interrupt you here, because I want to make sure that Alexi has enough time to give his presentation, and he has to jump off in 15 minutes, as have I.
okay.
Sorry for that. And I do appreciate that you also followed the best practice example of Tawan earlier on to summarize your points. Is very much appreciated. And with that, I would like to thank you, of course, and move to our last speaker today, Alexi Groskopf, who is the founder of Ocean Hub Africa and 4C Invest. It's an ocean impact accelerator and impact fund. And I think, in a way, you're probably the perfect person to close this session today, because you can speak to kind of, I think, all of the different topics that were discussed today. So I want to make sure that you have enough time for your presentation now. So Alexi, the floor is yours, and hopefully after that we have maybe 2 or 3 minutes to maybe answer one question from the audience. If we do not, I think maybe we take the approach that that the questions will be collected and then answered in writing after the session. But yeah, without any further ado, Alexi, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dennis. I'll try to be very quick. Thank you very much. Apologies, Senior, and thanks for the other panelists as well for their presentations. Thanks for hosting me today at the All Atlantic. I want to skim through indeed what is an example, a case study through the organization that I run called Ocean Hub Africa of public-private philanthropy partnerships. So I'm going to talk about this quickly and slide in there a few sort of more higher level takeaways, perhaps for a conversation that can follow from this. Let me see if yes, cool. So I've taken an approach of a much more, there's a bit more images at the beginning, but then you'll see there's going to be a few words, so you can, when you leave with the slides, that there's better understanding what's happening. I want to take you through a quick story of what Ocean Hub Africa has gone through and what it has become at the end. Initially, when we launched in 2019, and look at this as a case study, right, of private, public, and philanthropy partnership. In 2019, we set out to be an incubator. So early stage entrepreneurship support around ocean impact in Africa. And we realized there was no point trying to groom entrepreneurs if there's not an ecosystem to plug them into. So we dialed down the incubation, dialed up the ecosystem building effort, and we brought together authorities, innovation in finance, industries, science and research, foundations and nonprofits to create that ecosystem. That was the first base of this multi-stakeholder partnership, right? And there was a bit of authorities. There must be, because the ocean is a commons. It belongs to everyone and to nobody. And there needed to be the business aspect of it and the finance of it, because we believe that shifting things from within, to take back the point that Dennis made in introduction, we need to change the paradigm. We need to change how we see things. So we want to leverage the system that pours fertilizer on whatever derives economic value by bringing more outcomes linked to the economic value and also social and social environmental outcomes. So create that ecosystem, then demonstrating the incubation value, a way of doing it, and transfer that in 2022 to other incubators across Africa. The way we demonstrated our incubation was bootstrapped, so self-funded, private funded, sales funded, but we got philanthropic funding to spread our knowledge to other incubators across the continent. This ecosystem approach, this ecosystem support is something that the private sector doesn't immediately see value into because it's hyper diluted, to the point again that Dennis made earlier in the introduction. The air that we breathe is provided by ecosystem services, but it's no one person or organization wants to pay for it because everybody benefits from it, right? So the private and philanthropy approach also was useful and always aligned with policy, right? So government's public guidance. And now that we have this ecosystem and a pool of incubators across Africa, 27 incubators across Africa, supporting locally early stage entrepreneurs in the blue tech space, we could position ourselves as an accelerator. And the pipeline was built by the incubators, a community of practice of incubators. And now we're busy putting together the first Ocean Impact Fund commercial funding in Africa. Right. Why the triple P, so public, private, and philanthropy partnership here is just the ocean is a perfect space to do this, right? And Africa, perhaps even more so. I mean, the global south. I'm going to speak from an African perspective. The ocean agenda has matured, right? So we have clear priorities. So we know what to do. We definitely know what to not do, right? And we saw this at UNOC 3. Finally, all the science, which is usually based on the principle of refutation, was aligned, which is a huge signal. There's a paradigm shift. Again, Dennis spoke and touched upon it earlier. There's a new definition of progress, and progress is what brings together private and public, right? Private looks for economic outcomes, mostly, and public looks for social environmental outcomes. And progress, in its new definition, brings the two together, right? Progress is whatever derives economic value and social benefits, but within planetary boundaries. That shift, that paradigm shift, brings the two together. And we understand, thanks to the science, what we shouldn't do, and I mean the cost and what we should do, the cost of inaction. But what we don't know, and where philanthropy comes in, is we don't know what are the rewards of the action that we could take. What would be the most rewarding path immediately for the different outcomes that we're seeking, right? Whether private or public, whether economic or social environmental returns, right? So science helps us inform change, policy drives change, but it's down to businesses to implement the change, right? And that's the position that we took at Ocean Africa, and that's a position in the ocean space, especially again in Africa, with the youth, 50% of the youth by 2050 in the world, with one of the largest natural capital assets today, still untapped, and vast coastlines and priority seascapes. That makes it an ideal case study for the triple P partnership. So why policy should care? I'll skim through this super quickly because we all know this: food security, energy security, sovereignty, jobs, and adaptation, right? So working on their vulnerability and mitigating their impact. Why are they a bit too slow? Again, super high level, because I mean, policy and governments in particular have short-term mandates. We all know this is a big issue when looking at the long-term goals. And there's limited familiarity with all the ocean impact, the whole idea behind ocean. And we've seen in the presentations before that a lot of South Africa's priorities in terms of blue economy have been, around mining and foraging, right? So foraging, sorry, for mine, oil and gas, and mining. So which is not the most social impact verticals. It's a very complex multi-stakeholder coordination process. We heard about it from our Brazilian counterparts before. The MSP, Marine Special Planning, is a huge issue. But even without coordinating different stakeholders across industries and whatnot, even within governments and ministers, it's always a bit tricky. And actually, at Ocean of Africa, we've been talking a lot to blue economy ministers, or environment ministers, with really good feedback, really good resonance. But we never got really far until we spoke to the finance ministers. And that's where the transition to a more sustainable approach within the blue economy in a conversation with the government, with the Ministry of Environment, actually really worked. But this needed to be catalyzed because the public funding wants to help catalyze private funding. So this is where we need to take the blended finance approach, which was explained by Klaus Davos earlier in this call. Right, and there's all the perceived risk and the problem of speeding up the change because we're heading right into a wall at the moment, and the cost of changing at a high pace. Why finance should care? Because there's a great deal of money to be made. 5.2 trillion is the value of the blue economy globally by 2040. Less than 0.1% goes into ocean impact ventures in Africa. Of all the investment capital in the world, which is absolutely ridiculous. There's still a bit of people are scared. There's a lack of track record, but there are standards now that can help with the metrics and compare and benchmark, which should sort of help over time to de-risk a bit of the investment. And because there's a number of growing ventures in the ocean space that makes the investment case now a bit more attractive. However, they're a bit too slow, again, because of lack of familiarity with the ocean impact space, the lack of data. The multi-factor environment is either over-regulated or under-regulated in some spaces, which leaves room to massive speculation and perceived risks. And there's a huge ticket size mismatch. So we're talking about an emerging ecosystem, and established investors within bigger industries are more used. It's more economically viable for them to put larger tickets. So in the emerging side of things, it's a bit more difficult. How can triple P partnerships de-risk this? Unlock the situation, de-risking, demonstrating, putting those first tickets that the $100,000 US roughly that institutional and hard-nosed investors are not willing to take, and promote shared knowledge, right? Promote the science, be more patient, and be open source. I'm going to skip through this. And actually, I'm gonna end here, so I make sure that we have a few questions. These are processes where we mix within Ocean of Africa all the sort of government, private philanthropy, sales-driven, private investment, etc., through our different processes and programs. But I want to stop here because I want to leave space for questions. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Alexi, for rushing through the end there. It looks like we might nonetheless not have enough time for question and answer, unfortunately. So if you have a last, I'll give each of the speakers one last chance to give a one-liner, but I want to quickly summarize the session and then let you get one key takeaway from each of your presentations in before we close, if that's okay.
Sure. So should I do a wrap up of my presentation, or you want to do the wrap up of everything and then we do one liner each?
Let's do the one-liner first, and I do
Okay.
want to. So I think it's great if you can do a wrap up of your presentation.
I'm gonna give you one key sentence that I wish everyone could remember. So the definition of progress is a good one. I think sticks with everyone, hopefully.
Let's do that.
But I would love to see 10%. It's not a huge amount. 10% of every new ocean investment commitments be directed to early stage ventures. It's a massive, massive gap. We hear a lot about, oh yeah, we're going to put $3 trillion into this space, or whatever. No, I'm exaggerating, but $300 million into the ocean space. But we're all talking about massive scale infrastructure and not just scaling up stuff and big cost and not scaling out impact. That's what worries me. 10% of all new ocean commitments finance commitments should be towards early stage ventures. Perfect.
Thanks so much, Alexi. Love that tagline. Moving on to Tawan. Do you have a key message for the audience from your end? And of course, if you want to speak, I know that we're talking today about collaboration and partnership. So if you want to bring that in, feel free to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis, for this last minute. If I can sum up all my presentation, I would say that bringing a truly sustainable ocean economy means working across borders, sectors, and interests in order for us to create partnerships, investments, and governance that are fair, inclusive, and focus on the long-term health of our shared oceans. So summing up, the best I can do right now, And yeah, I remain available for further discussions as a professor of blue economy at the Brazilian Navy. So yeah, it's an honor for me to be here.
Thanks so much for this. Last but not least, Senia, over to you. What's your key message?
Thank you very much, Dennis. As someone from an institution of higher learning, I think there's a lot of research going on in universities, and sometimes it doesn't feed to policymakers. So some kind of science policy lab where academic institutions and practitioners come together to share experiences, either in webinars, conferences, and all, would be good. So if we can have funding to promote the blue economy initiatives, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And I'm going to try and wrap up this session in the last minute or two by first just trying to summarize a couple of the strands of conversation we heard this today. So we learned about how important it is that organizations have an integrated approach to this topic within a financial organization, as an example here, and what the benefits are of doing so. I think a lot we've heard that there's a big need for intentional and inclusive collaboration and adaptive policy making and governance to really reap the benefits of such holistic approaches. And specifically, marine spatial planning was mentioned by a lot of you, which I appreciate, and seems to be a really, really good tool that organizations and governments can really use to start planning for a healthier ocean. I think in terms of the kind of global ocean agenda, we see that this topic has been rising up the agenda, especially this year with the UN Ocean Conference having a Blue Economy and Finance Forum of 2 days just before the proceedings. Like, that was a big sign. And as many of you mentioned as well, that the G20 has positioned itself a bit as a catalyst for global collective ocean action with the O20 initiatives. And so that is really much welcomed. And hopefully we see more of that, more action driven by that. And lastly, I think we've been talking about profit and growth in this space, which cannot be the only driving forces in their own right, but they need to be working in the context of planetary boundaries and social safeguards. And specifically, Senia, I remember you talked about it, how do we place the correct value on living nature? So we don't just need a mindset shift, but also more robust data and skills development on this topic. And maybe just to close, in thanking all the beautiful speakers here today for sharing your wisdom, what really comes through quite strongly is that what we need is systemic action to truly shift financial flows away from harmful toward a sustainable and regenerative blue economy. But we also see that there are different stakeholders that have different roles to play. And there are many resources already available now to support their action. And I think Klaas, with his first presentation, highlighted a couple of them especially. So while there's a lot to do, it doesn't mean there is nothing to be done and we have to wait for things to change. And I know we can actually act today. There's a lot of support for organizations and governments who want to act. And so I advise everyone who is interested in this topic to really take action. Get educated and take action. And with that, I'm officially closing this session. So thanks everyone, and have a nice afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you may be based. Take care.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye now.
you.